Welcome to Scary Stories, and welcome to our first episode of 2023. Let's hope we somehow manage to have a less horrible year than 2022. You know, this story we have today is an odd one to be starting the year out on, to be sure. I personally dislike running this kind of a story, because if any part of it really does turn out to be true, as the author claims, then I might be making myself powerful enemies without even meaning to. I've tried to edit this one in a way that it would be interesting to listen to, while hopefully skimming enough personal information out to prevent being seen as slandering anyone. I haven't changed any of the information, but I have avoided certain topics, like exact locations in some cases, and names in all cases. I actually suggested to the original author that they could print their own version in any number of places online and have their precise vision realized, but they insisted. They wanted me to fix their grammar and do my own take on their original manuscript, reworked into my scary stories style. So, for better or worse, we ring in 2023 with a very out-of-the-ordinary episode, which we're presenting for entertainment purposes only. All werewolf art is illustration that I created for this show, and is not meant to depict any real people, whether living or dead. Now that we've hopefully covered our legal behinds, sit back, get comfortable, and allow us to tell you all about werewolves and dogmen among the elite. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a whopper of a tale to tell you. It's a lifetime collection of tales, to be honest, and it features both werewolves and dogmen in it. Some notable figures in Hollywood and big business own dogmen, you see, and some recognizable Hollywood film and television performers are owned by high-ranking werewolves. There's no way I can really prove any of this, so feel free to present it as fiction or else as the ravings of an old crazy man. All I can do is elaborate on my assertions by providing one bit of circumstantial evidence after another bit of hearsay after a dab or two of rumor mongering. I admit all that. But at my age, with my history, I can't really know how much longer I have to tell my stories. Really, in current year, none of us know how much longer we've got till, they fake the alien invasion. So I just want my dogman and werewolf stories to be part of the human record, while there still is one. I've been a chauffeur and assistant to a number of very powerful people, and at least once every 5 or 10 years, I seemed to get caught up in some secret scandal with my clientele. I usually accepted payment in one form or another to help them deal with their issues, and a couple of times I helped for free because I was being blackmailed. I think I just had bad luck, but I seemed to attract the most evil people as clientele, and there were times when I saw these people inside the back of the limo I was driving apparently appear to become non-human creatures or beings. I don't want to call it transforming because it wasn't exactly like what I've been taught to think of as a transformation by the Hollywood movies. I mean, it's very hard for me to explain this, even in person. I can see that some people understand what I mean, but others clearly show in their eyes that they do not grasp what I'm saying happened. I'm going to go through what an actual werewolf transformation looked like to me in real time, but as I said, transformation might not be the most accurate word. I had one limo that was owned by one of my bosses that I drove for 3 years as his employee. That one had a video screen so that I could see what was happening in the back seat. This was because I was secondarily paid as security. When he wanted real privacy, the boss had a way of covering that rear seat camera. When he'd put up the opaque block over the lens, then he could do whatever he and his guests pleased without me knowing. I have no idea what the activities were that I was blocked from seeing, but I do know that he had no problem at all showing me that he was, in fact, a part-time werewolf. Well, I guess all werewolves are part-time. They're human the rest of the time, I assume. Now, there may be other kinds of werewolves than this and other bosses that I've worked for over my long life, but I only ever encountered this kind. They are very sure of themselves. They feel they're too big to fail, and so they will let you see things sometimes that you wish they had never allowed you to see. The first time I saw my boss had become a wolfman kind of creature in the back of the limo, I knew I would never take another free step in my life. I knew I was going to have to prove my loyalty to this man, or really to this man thing, over and over until he was done with me. And maybe even after that, too. I knew things about him that I did not want to know, and so I needed to constantly from then on demonstrate that I was not planning on being any kind of a threat. Ironically, the more I learned about my boss's lifestyle, the more in danger of losing my life that I felt. So what happens is, you're aware that they're present in their human form. Then, and this is the hardest part to explain, you start to become unsure of who they are in that backseat area of the limo. You can see them again and again, but each time you glance into the back, or look in a mirror, or at the TV monitor, it's something different looking back at you. At the end of each transformation, I get this feeling that he always looked like a fur-covered monster with a canine-type head and upright pointing ears. I also feel at the same time that I know this has to be wrong. He couldn't be what I was seeing, because he was my boss. But you enter a state that I would almost compare to being drugged or hypnotized, where reality seems somehow alterable. And it feels like he is the one altering the reality and convincing me of the new reality and that it has overwritten the old one. Soon, he's not a human any longer. Soon he has a dog head, and you accept that as if it were normal, as if it would be insanity not to accept it. The next morning after these kinds of nights, I would have alarming memories, coupled with gut feelings that the alarming elements shouldn't alarm me. Instead, I became increasingly unnerved and uncomfortable with what was happening. After the first 6 or 8 months, I had become fairly well programmed to accept that not only was my boss a werewolf, but that a number of his closer business and social friends and associates were as well. He would sometimes party with them in the back of the limo, on his way to party with them at various mansions and venues. On occasion, when he felt especially unsure of his host, I would accompany him inside, and in those locations I saw so many recognizable figures doing so many unspeakable things that it makes the writings of the Marquis de Sade look like children's coloring books. These were people who were simultaneously feral animals, and they were doing the things that absolute power corrupts individuals into doing. I remember one noble young scriptwriter trying to buck the system and go public about the Hollywood werewolves. Before he could get his message out, he got caught with illegal materials and sentenced to an unusually long sentence in a very real prison. Luckily for him, he only had to serve around 4 or 5 months of his sentence. Unluckily for him, that was because he mysteriously got Epsteined in his cell, long before the term Epsteined even meant anything. I remember a young director who also had a big mouth. He was not dealt with in the same way, however. He was abducted and sacrificed to some, deity or demon. I didn't really ever understand what they were going on about. It sounded like grown men playing pretend devil games to me. But it wasn't pretend that they did this guy in. And then they did their werewolf thing on him. I'm not sure I can describe that part on YouTube, so I guess you'll have to use your imagination. What was left of him was eventually found in Northern California. I think it was ruled a wild animal attack, which I guess in a sense is what it was. That story, I admit, I heard third hand from another driver. But he absolutely believed it, and we had only been drinking for a little while when he told me all about that. One of my bosses during the period where I owned my own limo kept human women as his pets. He was also a werewolf, although anybody who knew about it kept their mouths shut. More people talked about the McMillan and wife guy marrying the Gomer Pyle guy than ever uttered a peep about the Wolfmen of Hollywood on the West Coast or the Werewolves of Wall Street and Washington way back in the East. Not all of those relationships and marriages were happy ones, but the women involved sometimes didn't feel they had any option but to play the part that life had cast them in. Sometimes werewolves take a human wife, and their offspring might turn out to be all human. They might turn out to take after their werewolf parent, however, as well. So when you're talking about individuals who have inherited money from multiple generations of rich ancestors, you really have to take a step back and wonder who exactly it is that we're talking about here. Now, there is another subject which I'm sure you'll agree is at least tangentially related to the first, and that is the Dogman. I teased in the beginning, not just powerful werewolves owning humans, but well-heeled celebrities secretly owning dogmen as well. Supposedly, that all began in the later 1940s, about 5 or 6 years before I started working as a chauffeur. The story I always heard back then was that the dogmen were imported illegally, smuggled into the US and Canada from Europe at the end of the war, when things were briefly in a state of flux internationally. I also heard another story that they all came from Canada, and I heard they were all European refugee werewolves who chose to stay in wolf form all the time in order to get fed better than in Europe at that point in history. But mostly I heard that they were dogmen or full-time natural werewolves who could walk either on all fours or upright like men do. Certain still well-remembered celebrity females from that era through the 60s had pet dogmen, and I drove for a few of the latter-day ones. These women would always go on and on to anyone about how intelligent their dogs were. I was told repeatedly that the big animals understood not only English, but certain other languages as well, some of them non-human. At first I thought these ladies were just batty. I mean, we are talking about Hollywood actors here. But gradually I came to accept that the dogs were in fact more intelligent than most of their owners, and possibly smarter than me sometimes as well. Nevertheless, they were intensely loyal to those women, and I knew they would snap my neck in a second if I ever made too fast a move while close to their mistress. And yes, I did see them in their upright position on multiple occasions. I also saw one of them walking alongside their mistress, a woman who was 6 foot or better in her heels, being dwarfed by this monstrous beast man. They always seemed to be looking from side to side, like Secret Service agents or something. They only needed the sunglasses to complete their look. It was never not unnerving to be around any of them. I wondered one time if they might be people in some sense. I mean, in an avatar sense. Like they were being controlled by real security personnel or something through a VR headset. That sounded sane in my head, but it looks pretty insane on the screen now that I've typed it. However, that is what it sometimes felt like around these dogmen. They felt like they had human consciousnesses, looking out silently from behind those canine eyes. That was the part that was even more chilling to me than the fact that they could end my life in a painful way anytime they wanted to. I mean, any of my clients could do that, if you think about it. I was sort of used to that as part of the job of dealing with the better paying employers. I understood all their motivations for why they would sometimes be dangerous. I could not understand what the dogmen even were, though, let alone where they were coming from, or what their motivations might be. And no matter how many times I was exposed to them, each encounter felt as shocking to me as the first one. One time I was sent by a male boss to deliver a package and a note to his female friend, and then I was supposed to wait for her to give me something to bring back to him. I arrived at her door a little bit before noon and was surprised to recognize her from a television program that I had watched as a teen. She was a bit older, but still quite beautiful, and my teenage crush on her took over. I knew her name seemed familiar, but I was kicking myself for not realizing who I was making the delivery to before seeing her there in front of me, a foot away, in her nightgown. I blushed, and I stuttered, and this woman, who must have been 25 years my senior, was quite flattered by the attention. Rather than making the handoff quickly, I found the former TV star inviting me inside her home. She asked if I wanted a drink, and I think I asked for hot cocoa, which I guess is pretty weird. I was nervous. I don't know what else to say. So I sat in a chair by her fireplace, which had a fire burning in it. I didn't want to sit on the couch because I was afraid she would sit next to me, and I was stuttering as it was. I was on the right side of the fireplace as you looked at it, next to the fire pokers and the windblower thingy and so forth. On the other side of the fireplace, curled in a circle on a mat, was a very large orange dog. I want to say it was a golden retriever, but I want to say it was an Irish setter too. It was a dinosaur of a dog in either case. I mean, it must have been some kind of hybrid interbreed or whatever the terminology is for giant orange hairy dogs. It slept there, not minding my presence, so I didn't mind it either. When my hostess returned with my hot cocoa, I had already been warmed up by the fire and my own nervousness and embarrassment. She kneeled by the fireplace in front of me and poked at it with one of her metal prods. We had a surprisingly easy conversation about my boss, about my job, about my favorite episodes of her old TV show, which I remembered far better than she did, and time passed quickly. When her dog lifted its head and yawned a humorous-sounding yawn, I realized the sun was already going down. I needed to get her to give me whatever I was supposed to bring back to my employer, and then I needed to get out of there. She was talking baby talk to her dog when I communicated my urgent need to get back to work, and she seemed to understand. Turning to the large canine, this lady said he could go get himself a treat because he was being so good, and then she'd finish up her business with the gentleman. Amazingly, the dog seemed to literally nod its head the way you or I would. He honestly did seem to comprehend the English language. And after that, the dog did something that almost made me fall sideways out of my chair into the fire. He stood up on his hind legs. When that creature did that, his tall ears almost brushed against the cobwebs up near the ceiling. He seemed so large when upright like that. It didn't feel like I was living in an ordinary reality any longer. I wondered if that woman put something in my hot cocoa, but I tried to play it off, like everything was normal. The dog then casually walked out of the room on its hind legs like a human, and I could hear a refrigerator door opening. My hostess was scratching a handwritten note out, presumably for my employer, as I sat there with my heart beating like a sledgehammer in my chest. When the dog walked back in the room, he was holding a turkey drumstick with one huge paw, gripping it around the narrow end, just as a human being would. I looked at the creature's paws, and they did not look like hands to my eyes, yet he was able to grip the turkey leg in the same way we would. His dew claw must have been situated close enough to the position of a thumb, and his claws must have been long enough that the creature had an ability to hold and manipulate objects. The big guy went back to his rug and collapsed dramatically down on his butt in a sort of a canine posture. Propping himself up on his left arm, he used his right to hold the drumstick up and take surprisingly soft and delicate bites out of it. When he did that, I could finally see that this was an older animal. Not all of his teeth were there, and his hunting days were long in the past. I wanted to talk to her more about her dogman friend, but it was time for me to leave. She gave me her phone number, and asked me to call her any time. When I drove away that night, I planned on doing just that. I was most interested in that lady and her very unique old pet. I planned on spending an awful lot of my time talking to the two of them. When I reached my boss, though, it turned out he had different plans for me. I was unaware that he had an interest in getting together with that lady himself. So all of a sudden he saw me as a problem. Rather than fire me, he actually hooked me up with a much better paying gig. It's just that the gig was a long way away from where that TV lady lived. I got the hint, and I declared her off limits for the sake of this client. I would have also done that for a friend. I don't try to move in on other people's territory in any sense, whether it be business or romance. But in this case, I made doubly sure to keep my distance because this guy paid my bills and he could also ruin you inside of 2 seconds if he felt you were crossing him. I've got some more stories, but since you aren't going to use the real names of these people, it kind of feels pointless to go on. I think you get the idea, though. There are a lot of these folks who don't see anything out of the ordinary about having a dogman as a pet sleeping by the fireplace, or getting married to a cannibalistic werewolf man. They live in a different world from the normal human world, and maybe that's why those people have gotten so incredibly strange. And in my opinion at least, kind of evil. And I suppose that's how we got to where we are, in a place where we find ourselves seeing werewolves and dogmen among the elite. Yvonne Marshall, give a cheer. She's been partial 1 full year. Please join us in thanking Yvonne Marshall on the Lizard in Cornwall, England for being a channel member now for 1 full year. We are very grateful to you, Yvonne, both for your membership and your wonderful entertaining comments. If any of the rest of you would like to join the friendly company of such nice people as Yvonne Marshall on the Lizard, just listen to our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman, as he has some important information for you. Hank? Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.